Welcome. This is a recorded session of the Post-Quantum Cryptography Conference of the PKI Consortium, which took place in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. This conference is made possible through the support of the PKI Consortium Post-Quantum Cryptography Working Group and our sponsors SSL.com, Entrust, Keyfactor, HID, and Crypto4A. And with exceptional organizational support from SSL.com, Keyfactor, Logius, POS Digicert, Baker Tilly, MSC Trustgate, and Digitoris. Join the discussion. Join the PKI Consortium. Go to pkic.org/join.
All right, folks, welcome to the first session back after lunch. Hopefully everybody with a full stomach is not going to fall asleep. Definitely won't with our next speaker, David Hook. David's a legend in the industry, last 30 years. He's got two fantastic accomplishments to his name. He's, besides being VP of Software Engineering at Keyfactor,
that's right.
He's co-founder of Bouncy Castle cryptography project. So that's one thing he's famous for, and the other thing he's legendary for is being an Australian. So I'm going to hand over to David and take it away. Thanks.
Yeah, good day. Okay, so today I was just going to quickly look at what's been happening in protocols and standards, because one of the issues, of course, that you run into with something like this is that it's great to have algorithms, but the obvious question is, how do you actually use them? You know, you can generate a signature using MLDSA, but how does that apply to things like TLS? Can you do client-side MLDSA? There's all these other things that actually need to be introduced to actually make these algorithms useful. So anyway, just looking at the story so far to bring everyone up to speed if they've been asleep, which, given that I've been talking about this for a few years now, would make perfect sense. This all started in 2016 with NIST announcing a competition. Then, basically, in 2019, one of the interesting things that happened was X509 standardized this idea of having two public keys and two signatures in a single certificate. At this point, though, of course, the algorithm still hadn't been standardized, although they were working down to a short list. 2024, though, we actually saw the first three NIST PQC algorithms standardized. And then in 2025, just recently, HQC has been announced as the round 4 winner, marking the actual end of the official original competition. And of course, SP 800-227 has come out, which is recommendations for KEM, so key encapsulation mechanisms. That's quite an important document because KEMs are not like RSA key transport, and they're not like Diffie-Hellman. They've got like one foot in both camps. So SP 800-227 is kind of, if you want to speak NIST speak, it's sort of to KEMs what SP 800-56B is to RSA and what SP 800-56A is to elliptic curve. So that gives us the basic algorithms, but the thing is that it hasn't stopped there. FNDSA is, of course, Falcon. That's actually part of the original NIST competition as well. HQC Chem, of course, is continuing to evolve, which we're trying to keep track of at Bouncy Castle. And of course, naturally, that'll go into a public comments period, and there'll probably be further changes there. The PQC signature process is still going on, and there's no real clear front runners there. One of the most popular algorithms in it is a thing called Mayo, which is an oil and vinegar sort of multivariate polynomial-based algorithm. It's always hard to tell, though, at this stage of a competition, whether it's popular because it's got a really cool, funky name or because it's actually very useful. Mayo is big, but yeah, we'll see how it goes. One while this is all going on, though, other countries, of course, have been, which is something I was talking about earlier before we started, other countries are also standardizing algorithms. Germany, BSI, is actually standardizing Proto, Chem, and Classic Michelise, and they're using the ISO process for doing that. Nippon Telecom has gone down the path of using NTRU, which means basically it's going to be used quite widely in Japan for a bunch of things, not just what they're using it for. They're using the IETF as the avenue for standardizing that. And SNTRU Prime is also being used by OpenSSH, and that is also using the IETF as the standardization route. On top of that, South Korea has actually announced four post-quantum algorithms earlier this year, 2 signatures and 2 chems, which they're planning to make use of. And China has also announced their own sort of competition to actually try and develop some national standards of their own, so they don't have to rely on the NIST ones. All this is a good thing because, as you're probably all aware, these post-quantum algorithms are all a bit new. And as we saw with round 4, when Psych actually turned out to be still quite quantum hard, but unfortunately breakable using a single core on a laptop in 2 hours, I think it was. Sometimes people make mistakes, even when they're well-intentioned, and a lot of people are studying it, because Psych actually got all the way into round 4. So it actually had been vetted quite heavily, but it still turned out to be broken. So first thing that you have to be able to do if you're going to use a post-quantum algorithm is you need to know how to serialize keys so you can interoperate with people. So the standards for this actually they were settled with the IETF. They haven't quite been fully ratified yet, but they were essentially settled as of about March this year, which is actually pretty good if you consider that the actual standards themselves for the algorithms were announced in August last year. So what ended up happening originally, if you're familiar with what was produced in the NIST test vectors and everything, essentially everything was done using the format that's marked here as expanded key. So a seed was taken and then used to generate an expansion of the key, which was then actually used for the encryption or decryption process. The catch with expanded key is that you actually throw away the seed. NIST never said to keep the seed around. So what happened then was at the start of this year, it was discovered or realized or something that you could actually just use the seed and you'd have a much smaller private key because you've got 64 bytes or 32 bytes in the case of MLDSA, which is fantastic when we worry about this sort of stuff, because as you can see, the actual size of the expanded key is a lot bigger than 64 bytes. Unfortunately, the NIST standard actually forbade that. So there was a bit of a discussion amongst people with NIST, a bit of yelling and screaming, some gnashing of teeth, hair pulling. Fortunately, I don't have much of an issue in the hair pulling stakes because I haven't got any hair. But yeah, if I had any, I probably wouldn't have any now. And we ended up with actually an ASM1 choice. So NIST actually decided to change their mind. The IETF changed their minds as well. And between all of us, we ended up with a compromise, which some people hate, but I actually kind of like it because it's very useful. Anyway, we're now in the position where you can actually store a private key for MLChem and MLDSA, we'll see in a minute, as either a seed, an expanded key, or as a sequence which has got both the seed and the expanded key in it. The only other comment I make there is if you're actually dealing with one where there's both, the best thing to do really is to use the seed to confirm that the expanded key is actually correct. And then as far as your other manipulations of the private key, you would just use the seed because, yeah, it's a lot smaller. In fact, I think the biggest motivation for the original whole thing about seed as private key was that people were caching private keys, and they realised if they were caching a lot of them, being able to just store the seed was a much better idea. So yeah, as you see with MLDSA, I can flick back if you got dazzled by the differences there. The numbers change, but the structure is exactly the same. So that gives us our first two. And then, of course, SLH-DSA is very non-controversial, which is nice because the original standard actually already suggested using the seed. So we just have an octet string in place for that. Now, this slide is slightly out of date, but that's okay. So certification requests, it's already been settled with PKCS 10 for the signing algorithms because they just basically drop in like any other signing algorithm would. And of course, there's certificate request CRMF, the protocol, which you can use with CMP. CHEMS, though, unlike RSA, where you could actually originally create a signature at the same time as being able to use a key for encryption, and there was a specific allowance for that in FIPS, for example, to allow you to create one signature for the purposes of getting a certificate, even if it was an encryption key. You can't do that with a CHEM. So you're basically left with, if you want to be pure about it for proof of possession, that's what POP stands for there. It's not SODA. You have to use cert enker, which essentially is you take the protocol, you generate the certificate, then you encrypt the certificate using the public key that you've been given, and you send it back to the party requesting it. So the proof of possession in that case is the fact that they can decrypt the certificate and then use it. At that point, you know they must have the private key. And usually what you would do there is you would actually get them to send you back what they call a certificate confirmation message, which involves getting back a hash. That's important if you're a CA and you're publishing publicly, because if you haven't got that hash, you don't have proof that they've actually got the private key. So if somebody's trying to play mischief with you, they might actually just send you a public key out of the blue and not worry about the fact they can't decrypt the resulting certificate. Now, there's also another protocol under CRMF called challenge response. And in that case, there's 2 additional messages before you generate a certificate if you're a CA. You send out a challenge, you send out an encrypted challenge, and then the client who's requested the certificate sends you back the decrypted response, showing that they've actually been able to decrypt what was encrypted with the public key that they sent in the first place. That does involve extra messages, which makes it a little bit more complex. The nice thing about cert enker is you don't really have to worry about anything other than certificate confirmation if you need it. But with the challenge response, obviously, you've got to maintain some level of state so you can keep track of which challenges you're sending out for which public key. Now, there's also a couple of proposals now for using PKCS 10, and the idea there really is to be able to use an MLDSA signing key in conjunction with an MLChem key. And there's just recently been ratified a standard in IETF, which is like a private key ownership testimony, where if you're, say, generating certificates for SMIME and you've got some control over the clients and everything, that you know people aren't going to be trying to play fun and games with you, you can actually generate a PKCS 10 request, which has actually got an MLDSA key, uses the signing key, and it's also got an MLChem key and an attribute, with this extra extension providing an affirmation that the private key is in fact legitimate for the MLChem key. And then what you do basically is you send back 2 certificates, one for MLChem, one for MLDSA. So then we have hybrid certificates, and I'll start with Chimera, which is the oldest one. This is the one that's actually standardized in X509 already. It was originally called Catalyst, but when it was actually launched in the IETF, that was a complete catastrophe for reasons I won't go into too much right now. But it involved the word patent. The patents and everything on this have since been rescinded, or rather let go of. Basically, it just allows for 2 keys and 2 signatures in the certificate. The issue that you get with this one, if you're trying to use it for migration, is that it's got this rather weird pre-TBS certificate calculation that you have to do. And the reason for that is that one of the signatures and one of the public keys actually appears as extensions, which is great because if the extension is not marked as critical, then anything you deploy it to that can't understand it will just ignore it. But the downside is, of course, it's actually very hard to calculate a signature over something which actually has the signature value in it as well. So they had to tweak the way the TVS certificate structure. The other weird thing about this one is because of the collapse of the IETF effort, there's no actual certification request format for it. But this is actually being used in X9.146, and that group is actually also looking at doing the certification request format to make it possible to use it. Next one is composite. This has just gone into publication. It's no longer in final call. In the last week, it actually went into, yes, final call is success. So it's coming to a stand near you. I said here it wasn't such a migration thing, more a hedge your bets thing. The idea with composite is you can have a classical signature and a post-quantum signature joined together, and you actually get a different algorithm. It's like there's a specific thing for a hybrid algorithm. It does have the advantage, though, that while the standard does say you have to evaluate both signatures, if you're in a situation where you just want to evaluate the classical one, it's only a small change if you need to do that. So you could conceivably have some equipment which you were planning to decommission soon, and you just update that enough so it could understand the classical signature and the composite certificate, and then you'd worry about the stuff that had longer life to actually handle the situation where the post-quantum signature had to be required as well. Chameleon is another way of sneaking in an additional key and signature. The advantage with this one is that it's really a swapping mechanism for migration. The advantage here is that there's no pre-TBS construct because the actual other signature that's inserted into the extension that's passed in is in fact a full certificate in its own right. So there's an algorithm for reconstructing that certificate, but at that point it's the same as any regular certificate. You don't have to worry about changing cert path analysis or anything like that. Dual usage, I'll just go through this one really quickly because, I talked about it a bit with SMIME. These have kind of cropped up as a proposal that was given to NIST in a talk earlier this year. And really it's to help people who were doing something a bit naughty, which is they were actually giving out RSA certificates that were being used for signing and encryption, even though everybody said it was a bad idea. Now, of course, they can't do it, but there is in fact a way of doing it, which is basically to, I guess some people would say abuse the X509 standard, but it still works. And, engineering, it's all about finding the right screwdriver to get the nail into the piece of wood with. Finally, there's unsigned X509 certificates. These are for trust anchors. Basically, the intuition here is just that everybody realised that, yes, post-quantum signatures are very big, but we never actually evaluate the signatures in trust anchors anyway because they're self-signed and we trust them by definition. The reality there is that there's no need to have the signature at all. So David Benjamin at Google pointed out we could replace the signature with a zero-length byte array if we call it this algorithm instead. And everyone went, yay, verily, this is a wonderful idea, and there we are. Admittedly, if you're running a Linux server, it's not such a big deal, but certainly if you're dealing with embedded systems or you're trying to ship hardware and stuff and embed trust anchors in it, this isn't a bad idea. Okay, CMS, just quickly, RFC 9629. So that's the fundamental of using key encapsulation mechanisms in cryptographic message syntax. For those of you that are really into CMS, you'd probably know there was an earlier mechanism for actually using chems, because there was actually an RSA chem originally. But there's a much more refined one now that chems are better understood. So this particular mechanism is also very much in line with what's appeared in SP 800-227, although it predates its publication. There's also a document on using MLDSA, and there's one on using SLHDSA as well. They're basically what you'd expect for any other signature algorithm. It's really just a matter of completeness that they've come forward. The only one that's radically different is the top one. TLS, we've got MLChem. There's a post-quantum hybrid version which uses ECDHE and MLChem as well. These algorithms are interesting, especially the second one. Well, actually not so much the second one. There is actually another hybrid version which actually includes ECDSA, elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman. That's what I'm talking about here. The thing about this one is that NIST basically says that if you've got one of the algorithms officially standardized, so you've got a certified elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman algorithm, and then you've got your MLChem implementation, which is not yet certified because it's rather hard to have one of those certified straight away. It's actually still regarded as compliant, so it's FIPS compliant. And the reason for that is you don't get to claim security about the MLChem part, but it does give you quantum hardening, which is what most people are after at the moment, because capture then decrypt is really the thing that a lot of people are trying to avoid at this point. And that really involves introducing elliptic curve, really involves introducing MLChem as quickly as possible. There's quite a lot of signs, even though these things are in draft. If you talk to someone from OpenSSL that's working with statistics of what people are doing, a lot of people are already using this algorithm. There's a draft, of course, for MLDSA to use it with TLS 1.3 for client-side authentication and server authentication. And the same with SLHDSA. And again, yeah, they basically function like regular signature algorithms. And then there's a list of general references. So it's an IETF thing on post-quantum cryptography for engineers, which is worth looking at. There is an RFC on terminology for post-quantum traditional hybrid schemes, which is also worth looking at because there's a lot of it. The PQC Almanac is basically a collection of examples for bouncy castle in both C# and Java on actually using these algorithms. The ACSC document is Australian Cybersecurity Centre, so that's the Australian standards essentially for planning for PQC. And then, of course, Germany has a BSI one, EU in general has the ETSI one, and then, of course, NIST has their website where you can actually look stuff up, which is still up despite the shutdown, which is all good. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thanks to David. We have a brief amount of time for question time, and we're going to do this like new prices, right? So if you're in the room, you actually have to come on down and grab a mic and ask a question. Is there any questions in the room? And you get to hold on to that mic and carry it to the next one if there's somebody else in the room.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. It was very enlightening. My question is on the topics of CMS and TLS. Is there no need to add a draft for the composite for interoperability for the composite one? So in TLS, do we need to have one for MLDSA and ECDSA? Is there no need? How would that work?
So if you're going to use composite, yeah, they would produce drafts for that. And I suspect now that composite's actually gone into publication, I don't know if you'll actually see it for TLS, and in fact, X9146 does allow for the use of composite via an extension. So in a sense, that's already covered, although X9 standards are a bit more complex because you have to pay for them, and there's the banks, which means that generally there's, people are keen to implement them because banks pay money for stuff. But yeah, certainly for CMS, I think we'll see a standard for composite because obviously cryptographic mesh syntax would be something that you want to use it with.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else in the room? Do you have any remote? All right. Well, once again, let's thank David, and that gives us a few minutes to move on to the next one.
How do you get to a quantum-safe state? That depends on the current state of your digital security infrastructure, as well as your level of visibility, control, and automation over those systems. Check your level of preparedness with the Entrust Post-Quantum Readiness Assessment. Whether you're already on the path to quantum safe or just beginning your journey, Entrust can equip you with the right knowledge and solutions. There are many paths to a quantum-safe future. Secure yours by taking the Entrust Post-Quantum Readiness Assessment today.